Some people walk into relationships carrying a hidden contradiction. They crave closeness, but they are often overwhelmed by it. They desire to be fully seen, but the idea of being completely exposed can make them retreat. They long for intimacy, but many of their deepest needs remain unspoken. This is especially true for highly sensitive and emotionally attuned people, often called empaths. What many people misunderstand about empaths is that they are not simply more emotional than everyone else. They are often more aware of emotional currents. They notice shifts in tone, changes in energy, tiny expressions that most people miss, and unspoken tension that hangs in the air. Because of this heightened awareness, intimacy becomes something entirely different for them. For many people, intimacy is about attraction, affection, or physical closeness. For an empath, intimacy often begins long before any touch ever happens. It begins with emotional safety. This is one of the deepest things an empath craves, but rarely says out loud. They want to know that they can lower their defenses without being punished for it. They want to know that their feelings won't be dismissed as overreactions. They want to know that they can reveal parts of themselves they keep hidden from the world, and still be accepted. Many empaths spend a significant portion of their lives adapting to other people's emotions. They become experts at reading rooms. They become experts at managing tension. They become experts at making other people comfortable. But when intimacy arrives, they often secretly hope for something they rarely experience. They hope someone will finally notice them. Not the version of them that takes care of everyone else. Not the version of them that keeps the peace. Not the version of them that always understands. They want someone to notice the person behind all of that. One of the things empaths rarely say out loud is this: I want to stop being the one who always carries the emotional weight. And many sensitive people become emotional caretakers. They listen, they comfort, they absorb, they understand. And after years of doing this, something interesting happens. They begin craving reciprocity. They want someone who can emotionally hold space for them too. This doesn't mean they want to be rescued. It means they want balance. They want to know that if they have a difficult day, someone can sit with their emotions instead of trying to fix them. They want to know that if they become vulnerable, the other person won't disappear. For empaths, intimacy is often less about intensity and more about emotional reliability. Another hidden craving is presence, not attention. Presence. There is a difference. Attention can be distracted. Presence feels focused. An empath can often tell when someone is physically near but mentally somewhere else. They notice the delayed responses. They notice the change in eye contact. They notice the shift in tone. Because they notice these small details, they often crave moments where someone is fully there with them. No phone, no agenda, no performance, just presence. To many people, this seems simple. To an empath, it can feel profoundly intimate. Another thing many empaths secretly crave is permission to be imperfect. People often assume sensitive individuals are naturally open with their emotions. Many are not. Many have learned to become strong for everyone else. Many have become the dependable one, the understanding one, the patient one, and eventually they become exhausted by carrying that identity. Deep down, they often wish someone would say, "You don't have to hold everything together here." That sentence can feel incredibly intimate to an empath, because it offers rest, and rest is something many emotionally attuned people desperately need. Another hidden desire is emotional honesty. Empaths are often uncomfortable with emotional ambiguity. They pick up inconsistencies. They notice mixed signals. They sense when words and emotions don't match. Because of this, they often crave straightforward communication. They want authenticity. They want sincerity. They want emotional congruence. They would often prefer a difficult truth over a comforting illusion, because uncertainty can be emotionally exhausting for someone who naturally reads between the lines. Many empaths also crave emotional permission. Permission to ask questions. Permission to have needs. Permission to require reassurance. Permission to say, "I don't feel okay today." People who are used to caring for everyone else sometimes become uncomfortable receiving care themselves. They may even feel guilty when attention turns toward them. Yet in intimate relationships, one of their deepest unspoken wishes is to experience mutual support, to feel chosen, to feel prioritized, to feel emotionally safe enough to stop monitoring everything around them. Another thing that often goes unspoken is the desire to be deeply understood without having to explain every feeling. This doesn't mean mind reading. It means emotional attentiveness. It means someone noticing when their energy changes. Someone asking, "You seem quieter today. Is something on your mind?" Those small moments can mean far more to an empath than grand gestures, because they communicate something powerful. I notice you. And for people who spend much of their lives noticing everyone else, being noticed can feel extraordinarily intimate. Empaths also tend to crave emotional consistency. Unpredictability can create significant internal tension, warm one day and distant the next, affectionate one moment and detached the next. These patterns can create emotional fatigue. Consistency creates trust. Trust creates safety. Safety creates intimacy. Another hidden craving is acceptance of emotional depth. Sensitive people often experience emotions intensely. They may think deeply, reflect deeply, care deeply, and throughout life, they may have been told that they are too sensitive, too emotional, or too intense. So one of their quiet hopes in relationships is to find someone who does not fear that depth, someone who doesn't ask them to become smaller, someone who doesn't require them to suppress parts of themselves in order to be loved. Because genuine intimacy is often experienced as emotional permission to be fully oneself. Many empaths also crave silence, not empty silence, comfortable silence, the kind where nothing has to be performed, nothing has to be explained. Two people can simply exist together without pressure. For highly attuned people, that kind of silence often feels safer than endless conversation. It communicates security. It communicates acceptance. It communicates, you do not need to entertain me or manage my emotions. And that can be incredibly comforting. Perhaps one of the deepest things empaths crave during intimacy is emotional refuge. A place where they can put down the emotional armor they wear in the outside world. A place where they do not have to read everyone. A place where they do not have to anticipate every need. A place where they can simply be human. Because even the people who seem strongest emotionally become tired. Even the people who understand everyone else want to be understood. Even the people who constantly give support sometimes long to receive it. And beneath all of these desires lies one simple human need: to feel safe enough to be completely authentic with another person. The irony is that many emotionally attuned people become experts at creating emotional safety for others while quietly wondering what it would feel like to experience that same safety themselves. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from always being the one who notices everything. You notice when someone's voice changes. You notice when their smile isn't genuine. You notice the tension they are trying to hide. You notice the sadness behind their words. You notice the disappointment they haven't mentioned. Over time, this can create an unusual dynamic in relationships. The empath becomes the emotional observer, the interpreter, the support system. They become so accustomed to reading everyone else that they sometimes forget they also have needs. Then intimacy arrives. And suddenly, beneath all the understanding and emotional intelligence, a quiet question appears. Will anyone notice me the way I notice everyone else? That question is rarely spoken out loud, but it sits underneath many relationships. One of the deepest cravings during intimacy is to feel emotionally held, not controlled, not rescued, held. There's a difference. Being emotionally held means your feelings are not treated as inconveniences. It means your fears don't have to be hidden. It means your vulnerability isn't met with judgment. It means another person can sit beside your emotional experience without trying to escape from. So many highly sensitive people have spent years hearing phrases like, "You're overthinking," "You're too sensitive," "You're making this into a bigger deal than it is." Eventually, they begin censoring themselves. They edit their emotions. They reduce their needs. They speak less. They ask for less. They reveal less. Then, when genuine intimacy begins to form, one of their deepest desires is permission to stop editing themselves. They want to know, if I show you all of me, will you still stay? That question can define entire relationships. Because for many emotionally perceptive people, love isn't simply about attraction. It's about emotional permission. Permission to be complex. Permission to have difficult days. Permission to need reassurance. Permission to feel deeply. Permission to not have everything figured out. Another thing many empaths crave but struggle to articulate is emotional predictability. This doesn't mean they need every day to look the same. It means they want to know where they stand. Mixed signals can be incredibly difficult for emotionally attuned people because they tend to process inconsistency intensely. If someone is affectionate one day and distant the next, the empath often notices immediately. Their mind begins asking questions. Did something change? Did I do something wrong? Are they upset? Is something happening? This doesn't necessarily mean they are insecure. It means they are highly responsive to emotional shifts. And because they notice these changes quickly, Consistency often feels deeply intimate. Predictability becomes calming. Reliability becomes attractive. Emotional steadiness becomes safe. Another hidden longing is to be chosen intentionally. Many sensitive people have been valued for what they provide. They provide comfort. They provide understanding. They provide patience. They provide support. But deep down, many of them want to know that they are wanted for who they are, not just for how they make others feel. This distinction matters, because being needed and being cherished are not the same thing. Being useful and being loved are not the same thing. Many empaths spend years being useful. Eventually they crave something else. They crave emotional reciprocity. They want someone to ask how they're doing and genuinely wait for the answer. They want someone to notice when they're struggling. They want someone to create emotional space for them. This is why small acts often carry enormous emotional significance. A thoughtful message, remembering something important, checking in unexpectedly, sitting quietly together. These moments communicate something powerful. You matter to me. And to someone who spends much of life caring for others, that message can feel profoundly intimate. Another unspoken craving is emotional transparency. Many emotionally attuned people struggle when there is emotional fog in a relationship. Unspoken resentment, hidden feelings, passive communication, contradictory messages. They often sense that something is wrong before words are ever spoken. This can create internal tension. They start trying to decode the situation. They look for clues. They analyze interactions. They try to restore emotional clarity. As a result, one of the things they value most is directness. Not harshness, not confrontation. Clarity. Simple, honest communication often creates a sense of safety. Because emotional ambiguity can feel exhausting to someone who naturally notices subtle changes. Another thing many empaths secretly desire is emotional refuge from the outside world. Many highly sensitive people experience social interactions intensely. Crowded environments, conflict, negative emotions, high-pressure situations. These things can be draining. As a result, intimacy often becomes associated with recovery. They want relationships that feel peaceful. They want connections that feel grounding. They want spaces where they can finally exhale. They want to come home emotionally. And that's an important phrase, to come home emotionally, because some relationships don't feel like home. They feel like work. They feel unpredictable. They feel demanding. They feel confusing. But emotionally safe intimacy often feels different. It feels like relief. It feels like acceptance. It feels like not needing to perform. Many sensitive people are also deeply affected by emotional tone. The words matter, but the emotional atmosphere matters too. Affection spoken with irritation feels different. Reassurance spoken without attention feels different. Kindness spoken mechanically feels different. Emotionally attuned people often perceive these differences immediately. As a result, they often crave sincerity more than perfection. You don't have to say the perfect thing. You don't have to respond flawlessly. But authenticity matters. Presence matters. Genuine attention matters. Because intimacy isn't only about what is said. It's also about what is felt. Another hidden desire is to be emotionally pursued sometimes. Many empaths become initiators. They check in. They remember details. They ask questions. They maintain emotional connection. Over time, however, they may begin wondering, would anyone move toward me if I stopped doing all the emotional work? It's a difficult question, because many people who are naturally nurturing eventually become tired. They want to experience being cared for too. They want to experience being considered. They want someone else to notice the emotional temperature of the relationship. They want someone else to say, "You seem overwhelmed. How can I support you?" Those moments often create profound feelings of closeness, because they reverse the usual pattern. The person who usually gives now receives. The person who usually notices is now being noticed. The person who usually carries emotional weight can finally put it down for a moment. Another thing that often remains unspoken is the craving for emotional patience. Sensitive people don't always process experiences quickly. They may need time. They may reflect deeply. They may revisit conversations internally. They may need space to understand their own emotions. A partner who offers patience rather than pressure often creates tremendous safety, because patience communicates acceptance. It says, you don't have to hurry your feelings. You don't have to be different right now. You don't have to process on my timeline. This can feel deeply intimate. Another important aspect is the desire for emotional congruence. Highly attuned individuals often become uncomfortable when actions and words don't match. If someone says, "I'm fine," but clearly appears upset, The inconsistency can be difficult to ignore. Many empaths value emotional honesty because it reduces uncertainty. They don't necessarily need perfection. They need authenticity. They need emotional alignment, because trust is often built through consistency between words and behavior. Another unspoken longing is to experience emotional rest from hypervigilance. Some sensitive people have spent years carefully monitoring emotional environments. They anticipate problems. They prepare for conflict. They notice every change. This constant awareness can be exhausting. So one of the deepest experiences of intimacy for them is feeling safe enough to stop scanning, to stop analyzing, to stop anticipating, to simply be present. That kind of safety can feel extraordinary, because it allows the nervous system to relax. It allows the mind to become quiet. It allows genuine closeness to develop. Ultimately, many of the things empaths crave during intimacy are not dramatic. They're subtle. Steadiness, presence, emotional honesty, patience, reciprocity, acceptance, being noticed, being understood, being allowed to exist without performing a role. Underneath all of these desires is a deeply human longing, to be with someone who doesn't merely appreciate the care you give to others, but who also recognizes that you too need care, that you too need understanding, and that even the person who seems to understand everyone else is still hoping that somewhere, with someone, they can finally feel completely safe being seen. There's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about very often. Many emotionally attuned people have a complicated relationship with being understood. On one hand, they desperately want it. On the other hand, they sometimes don't believe it's possible. After all, if you've spent years feeling different, sensing things others don't seem to notice, or carrying emotional experiences that are difficult to explain, you may eventually stop trying to explain them. You simplify your answers. You say, "I'm fine." You say, "It's nothing." You say, "Don't worry about it." Not because there isn't something there, but because you've become accustomed to the idea that most people won't fully understand. So when intimacy develops, one of the deepest unspoken cravings emerges. I want someone to ask one more question. Not because they need to be interrogated, but because genuine curiosity feels like care. Someone saying, "You seem different today. Talk to me." Someone noticing. Someone staying present. Someone being interested in the inner world you usually keep hidden. For many emotionally sensitive people, that can feel incredibly intimate, because it communicates something rare. You don't have to carry your experience alone. Another thing many empaths quietly crave is emotional gentleness. This doesn't mean fragility. It doesn't mean they can't handle difficult conversations. Quite often, they can handle difficult truths remarkably well. What becomes difficult is unnecessary harshness, coldness, dismissiveness, contempt, emotional carelessness. Highly attuned people often feel emotional tone deeply. A sentence spoken with kindness lands differently than the exact same sentence spoken with irritation. A disagreement handled respectfully feels entirely different from one handled with emotional aggression. Because of this, gentleness often becomes associated with safety, and safety becomes associated with intimacy. This is why many empaths value emotional maturity so highly. Not perfection, maturity, the ability to communicate honestly without becoming cruel, the ability to stay connected during disagreement, the ability to listen without immediately becoming defensive, the ability to make room for another person's emotional experience. These things create trust, and trust creates depth. Another hidden craving is the desire to be accepted in their complexity. Sensitive people often have rich internal worlds. They think deeply, they imagine deeply, they reflect deeply. They can hold contradictory feelings at the same time. They can be grateful and sad, confident and uncertain, strong and exhausted, excited and afraid. And sometimes they worry that this complexity is too much, too complicated, too intense. So one of their deepest hopes during intimacy is to meet someone who doesn't require them to become simpler in order to be loved. Someone who can tolerate nuance. Someone who doesn't need every emotion to fit neatly into a category. Someone who can sit beside complexity without trying to erase it. Because intimacy often grows in the places where people feel permitted to be fully themselves. Another thing many empaths crave but rarely articulate is emotional protection. Not control, not dependence. Protection. The feeling that someone is looking out for your emotional well-being too. Many emotionally attuned people spend years protecting others. They avoid conflict. They soften difficult conversations. They anticipate needs. They manage emotional atmospheres. Eventually, a quiet longing appears. What would it feel like if someone protected my heart for a change? This can show up in very ordinary moments. Someone defending them. Someone speaking kindly about them when they aren't present. Someone remembering what hurts them and choosing not to repeat it. Someone being careful with their vulnerabilities. Because for many sensitive people, trust is not built through grand gestures. It's built through repeated emotional safety. Over and over. Small moments. Consistent moments. Reliable moments. Another hidden desire is the ability to exist without constantly being on. Many empaths become highly skilled at emotional labor. They monitor, they support, they empathize, they soothe, they read between the lines. But all of this takes energy, a tremendous amount of energy. And one of the greatest gifts intimacy can provide is relief from performing these roles. Imagine being with someone where you don't need to manage the mood. You don't need to anticipate reactions. You don't need to maintain harmony. You don't need to take responsibility for everyone's emotions. You simply get to exist. For many emotionally attuned people, that feels like freedom, and freedom often feels like love. Another important piece of this puzzle is reassurance. This can be misunderstood. People sometimes assume that needing reassurance means someone lacks confidence. That's not necessarily true. Many emotionally sensitive people simply place high value on emotional clarity. Because they notice subtle changes, they sometimes appreciate direct confirmation. I care about you. We're okay. I understand. I'm here. Simple statements, but incredibly powerful. Words that reduce uncertainty. Words that reinforce connection. Words that create security. Security is often one of the hidden foundations of intimacy. Because when people feel secure, they become more authentic. They become more open. They become more willing to reveal themselves. And that is where genuine closeness begins. Another thing many empaths quietly long for is emotional reciprocity and curiosity. They spend a lot of time learning about others, understanding others, remembering details about others, asking questions, paying attention. Eventually, they begin hoping someone will become equally curious about them. Not because they want to be the center of attention, but because curiosity communicates value. It says, I want to know who you are. I want to understand your experiences. I care about your inner world. This kind of attention often creates profound feelings of connection, because everyone wants to feel known, and people who spend their lives knowing others are no exception. Another hidden craving is emotional permission to have needs. This is a significant one. Many emotionally attuned people become accustomed to being self-sufficient. They become helpers, problem solvers, support systems. Over time, they may begin feeling uncomfortable needing anything themselves. They become so used to giving that receiving starts to feel unfamiliar, sometimes even uncomfortable. Yet during intimacy, a quiet desire often appears. I want to know it's okay to need something too, to need comfort, to need reassurance, to need support, to need closeness, to need understanding. Healthy intimacy often includes this kind of permission. Permission to be cared for, permission to lean, permission to receive, because relationships become unbalanced when one person only gives and never receives. Another thing that often goes unsaid is the desire for emotional steadiness during conflict. Conflict itself is not necessarily the problem. Unpredictability often is. Emotional explosions, silent withdrawal, sudden coldness, cruel comments. These things can feel particularly intense for highly sensitive people. What many of them crave instead is repair. The ability to disagree without destroying connection. The ability to say, we're upset right now, but we're still a team. That feeling of security during difficult moments can create extraordinary trust. Because intimacy isn't measured by the absence of conflict. It's often measured by how people move through conflict together. Another hidden longing is simply to be believed. If they say they're overwhelmed, believe them. If they say something hurt them, believe them. If they say they're exhausted, believe them. Many sensitive people have spent years having their experiences minimized. They've heard, you're overreacting, you're being dramatic, you're taking it too personally. Eventually, they may begin doubting themselves, questioning themselves, editing themselves. So when someone responds with, I understand, that makes sense. I can see why you feel that way. It can feel incredibly healing, because validation is deeply connected to safety, and safety is deeply connected to intimacy. Perhaps one of the deepest things empaths crave during closeness is this: the opportunity to stop carrying everything alone, to stop being the strong one for a little while, to stop being the observer, To stop being the emotional translator, to stop being responsible for everyone else's feelings, to simply rest, emotionally, mentally, relationally, because beneath all the insight, all the sensitivity, all the awareness, and all the emotional intelligence is a very human desire, to be met with the same care they so freely offer others, to be understood without having to earn it, to be accepted without needing to shrink themselves, to be loved without performing a role, to feel safe enough to reveal the parts of themselves they usually protect. And perhaps that is what many emotionally attuned people are really searching for in intimacy. Not perfection, not constant intensity, not someone who reads their mind, but someone whose presence quietly says, "You don't have to carry everything here. You don't have to explain every part of yourself. You don't have to be the strong one all the time. You can rest now." And for someone who has spent much of life feeling everything, noticing everything, and holding space for everyone else, those simple experiences can feel less like ordinary intimacy, and more like finally being understood in a way they may have been craving for a very long time.